Elias Voss stood at the edge of his modest estate, overlooking the amber horizon of the colony world Velis 4. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in deep hues of crimson and gold. It should have been a peaceful evening. Instead, the distant rumble of approaching gunships sent a shiver through the air. He had been expecting this day. He just hadn't expected it to come so soon. The Galactic Empire was never known for its patience. The moment the ships touched down, a squad of Imperial enforcers fanned out, their sleek black armor reflecting the dying light. Their movements were precise, calculated, too efficient for a simple house call. Elias exhaled slowly, schooling his features into something unreadable as the squad's leader, a towering figure with deep-set reptilian eyes, stepped forward. "Elias Voss, by order of the Imperial Senate, you are under arrest." The officer's voice was guttural, lacking any pretense of diplomacy. Elias raised an eyebrow, showing just the right amount of amusement. "Arrest? On what grounds?" The officer's scaled lips pulled back in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Treason, conspiracy, and inciting rebellion against the Empire." Shall I continue? There it was. A list of charges so absurdly vague that they could apply to any human the Empire didn't like. Elias let his gaze sweep over the squad elite soldiers, all armed, all prepared for resistance. The Empire did not take chances, especially not with humans who once held power. He nodded once. "You must have the wrong man." The officer's eyes flickered with annoyance. He gestured, and two enforcers stepped forward, securing magnetic cuffs around Elias's wrists. Cold energy pulsed against his skin as the restraints locked in place, cutting off any chance of escape. They expected him to resist. He didn't. As the enforcers led him toward the waiting transport, Elias cast a final glance toward his home, memorizing every detail. He had built this life from nothing, had chosen peace over war. And now, in one swift moment, the Empire had taken it from him. Inside the gunship, the cabin was sterile, the air thick with the metallic tang of recycled oxygen. Across from him, seated in a high-backed chair, was a familiar face, Commander Zelvarn, an Imperial officer known for his brutal efficiency. His emerald-green skin shimmered under the dim cabin lights, his elongated fingers steepled together in contemplation. "I would say it's an honor, Voss, but we both know that would be a lie." Zelvarn's voice was smooth, almost pleasant. "You've been a difficult man to track." Elias settled into his seat, unfazed. "I wasn't hiding." "No, I suppose not," Zelvarn conceded. "But you were being quiet. And that makes the Senate nervous." Elias tilted his head. "Ah. So, they're afraid of a retired diplomat living on a backwater colony?" Zelvarn chuckled. "Hardly. They're afraid of what you represent. Of what your name still means to certain people." His tone sharpened. "You should have disappeared when you had the chance." Elias smiled, calm, knowing. "Should I?" The subtle shift in Zelvarn's expression was telling. He was a predator, but he knew better than to underestimate his prey. Something about Elias's reaction unsettled him, though he hid it well. "You'll be taken to Etheron Prime, where you'll stand trial before the Senate," Zelvarn continued. "Of course, the outcome is already decided. You're guilty, Voss. It's only a matter of how quickly they decide to make an example of you." Elias exhaled, slow and measured. "And what if I told you that arresting me was a mistake?" Zelvarn's gaze narrowed. "A mistake?" A flicker of amusement crossed Elias's face. "You don't know what you've done, do you?" Silence stretched between them. Then, Zelvarn leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Enlighten me." Elias did not answer. He simply smiled. The transport ship shuddered as it ascended into the upper atmosphere. From his seat, Elias could see the vast expanse of space opening before them, the Imperial warship Apex Dominus looming in orbit like a predatory beast. It was an impressive sight, meant to instill fear. It did not. As the ship docked and the enforcers moved to escort him out, Zelvarn studied him with renewed scrutiny. The human was too calm. Too composed. As if he were waiting for something. The doors hissed open, revealing the cold, sterile corridors of the Imperial vessel. Elias was led forward, his boots echoing against the durasteel floor. Every soldier they passed regarded him with either contempt or mild curiosity. To them, he was just another human troublemaker. Zelvarn walked beside him, silent for a moment before finally speaking. "You're smiling." Elias didn't deny it. "You think someone's coming for you?" Zelvarn asked, amusement lacing his tone. "Perhaps an old friend? The remnants of your pathetic rebellion?" Elias's expression didn't change. "Not a rebellion." Zelvarn scoffed. "Then who?" Elias met his gaze, his voice measured, deliberate. "My wife." The amusement drained from Zelvarn's face. Elias chuckled. "You don't know, do you?" "Of course, you don't. The great Galactic Empire, so sure of its strength, so certain of its control. You never even considered the possibility." Zelvarn's composure faltered for just a second, a fraction of hesitation, but enough. Enough for Elias to see it. He leaned in slightly. "You should start running." Before Zelvarn could respond, a sudden alarm blared through the ship. Red emergency lights flashed, sirens wailing in rapid succession. Shouts erupted from the comm channels, urgent, panicked. Then, the ship trembled. Not from a system malfunction. Not from turbulence. From something outside. Zelvarn stiffened, his comlink crackling with static before a frantic voice cut through. "Sir. We have unidentified vessels inbound, human signatures, multiple battleships." For the first time since the arrest, Elias's smile widened. "Now," he said, stretching his shoulders as if settling in for a show, "let's see how fast your empire really falls." The message arrived in the dead of night. A low chime echoed through the war room, a sound designed to be unintrusive, almost polite. But there was nothing polite about the grim-faced officer who placed the encrypted data slate onto the central console. The air was thick with the scent of cold metal and ozone, the ever-present hum of the fleet's reactor cores thrumming beneath the floor. Adrian Voss did not need to read the message to know what it said. She had been waiting for this moment. She picked up the slate, her sharp blue eyes scanning the text as the officer, Commander Renfield, stood at rigid attention. He was one of the few men in the galaxy who had served under her long enough to recognize the shift in the air, the precise moment when General Adrian Voss stopped being a leader in exile and became something far more dangerous. Her grip tightened. They had taken Elias. The room remained silent. None of the men seated around the war table dared to speak. They had seen her in battle, had watched entire fleets crumble beneath her relentless strategies, had stood in awe as she orchestrated victories against impossible odds. But at this moment, their formidable commander was still. A blade yet to be unsheathed. Finally, she exhaled. The sound was measured, controlled. When she looked up, her voice was razor-sharp, utterly lethal. "Status of the fleet." Renfield did not hesitate. "Phase 2 of the reconstruction is complete. We have 6 dreadnoughts, 23 cruisers, and a full contingent of stealth corvettes ready for deployment. Weapons systems are fully operational. Strike teams are prepped." He hesitated, then added, "The men are eager, General." They were always eager. Humanity had never truly fallen, despite what the Galactic Empire believed. The remains of their fleet had scattered like embers after the last Great War, but embers only needed the right wind to ignite again. And Adrian had spent years preparing for this. She turned her gaze to the tactical display, where the glowing insignia of the Empire pulsed like a heartbeat over the galactic map. Velis 4 was already under Imperial control. Elias would be en route to Etheron Prime, heavily guarded. They thought they had time. They didn't. Adrian set the slate down, the smallest of smirks curling her lips. "Scramble the fleet," she said, voice like iron. "We launch within the hour." No hesitation. No debate. The war room erupted into movement, officers snapping into action, orders relayed across encrypted channels. Engines roared to life. Shields powered up.
stealth systems engaged. The vast, hidden human fleet, thought to be little more than scattered remnants, prepared to move as one.
As the final confirmations came in, Renfield remained, watching her with an unreadable expression. Unlike the others, he had fought beside Elias once. He knew what the man meant to Adrian, not just as her husband, but as a symbol. He was the last piece of her humanity. "Do they understand what they've done?" he asked quietly. Adrian met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "No," she said. "But they will." The first strike had to be surgical, devastating, absolute. Not a rescue. A message. The Imperial prison convoy was a fortress in motion, its escort ships arranged in a textbook defensive formation. Adrian analyzed the data streaming into her console, reading their patterns, their vulnerabilities. The Empire's arrogance made them predictable. She selected a group of 10 stealth corvettes, their hulls coated in adaptive camouflage, and dispatched them like wolves into the darkness of space. The moment came 40 minutes later. The convoy never saw the attack coming. The first explosions were silent in the vacuum of space, but the damage was unmistakable. Precision strikes ripped through the Imperial escort, crippling engines, disabling communications, and severing escape routes before the Empire even realized they were under siege. By the time their distress signals flickered through the void, it was too late. Adrian's forces were already moving, sweeping through the wreckage like ghosts. The enemy's screams never reached her ears. She had no interest in their dying words. Within minutes, the convoy was nothing but debris and silence. She did not ask for a casualty report. She did not celebrate. This was only the beginning. Renfield's voice crackled through the command channel. The target wasn't on board. Adrian expected as much. The Empire would have taken Elias directly to Etheron Prime, where they could parade his trial before the Senate like a trophy. They were trying to make an example of him. They had only ensured their own destruction. Her voice was calm. Unshaken. Then we moved to the next phase. Her fleet shifted course. The next target was an Imperial supply depot, a critical hub for fuel, weapons, and rations. It was unprotected, a facility so deep within Imperial space that the very thought of an attack was unthinkable. Adrian intended to make them think again. She studied the live transmission from one of her operatives, a man embedded deep within the Empire's command network. The Senate was already in chaos, whispers of the attack on the convoy spreading like wildfire. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others hesitated, sensing something far worse. She could almost hear their fear. A flicker of movement on the display caught her eye. Another incoming transmission, this one marked urgent. Her fingers hovered over the control panel for a second before she activated the feed. The holographic image of Elias appeared before her. He was still alive. Still calm, even as he stood within the cold, sterile walls of an Imperial detention facility. The feed was grainy, intercepted from a secured Imperial channel, but his voice was clear. "They don't know," he said simply. Adrian's smirk returned, slow and deliberate. "They will." The Imperial Senate was in turmoil. The chamber, a vast amphitheater of polished obsidian and gilded insignias, echoed with the clamor of dozens of alien voices, each more agitated than the last. The recent attacks had sent tremors through the Empire's core, shaking the illusion of absolute control. At the center of the chamber, seated on an elevated throne of black stone, the Imperial sovereign observed the chaos with thinly veiled contempt. His many-lidded eyes, pale and unblinking, flicked between his advisors, each one speaking over the other in a desperate attempt to make sense of what had happened. "This is unacceptable," one of the war ministers snarled, his armored carapace clicking as he slammed a fist onto the podium. "A human insurgency attacking our forces this deep into Imperial space? Impossible." "They did not merely attack," another corrected, her gossamer wings twitching. "They annihilated an entire convoy without suffering a single casualty. This was not an act of rebellion. This was precision warfare." The sovereign remained silent, taloned fingers tapping against the armrest of his throne. His kind did not speak impulsively. He listened, and he calculated. One of his advisors, Lord Vyrek, a high-ranking strategist, stepped forward. His expression was composed, but beneath the calm exterior, his scent betrayed unease.
"This cannot be mere insurgents," Vyrek stated.
The level of coordination, the stealth tactics, the target prioritization, this was not an ambush.
This was a demonstration. The chamber fell into a tense silence.
The weight of his words settled like a heavy fog.
A demonstration. The Empire was not dealing with scattered human dissidents.
They were dealing with an organized military force.
The sovereign's fingers stilled.
He finally spoke, his voice a low, resonant vibration that sent a shudder through the hall.
"Who commands them?"
For the first time since the meeting began, no one had an answer. The silence stretched too long. The sovereign's many eyes narrowed. His gaze flicked to Commander Zelvarn, who stood rigid near the chamber's edge. Unlike the others, he had seen the face of the one human who did not look afraid. Zelvarn hesitated only a moment before speaking. "The prisoner, Elias Voss, made a statement before we lost contact with the convoy. He said we should start running." A murmur rippled through the Senate. Some scoffed at the idea, a lone human prisoner issuing a threat, but the sovereign saw something deeper. He gestured for Zelvarn to continue.
"There is one other thing," Zelvarn admitted, his voice measured.
"When I asked who was coming for him, he gave only one name." He exhaled, as if reluctant to say it aloud.
"Adrian Voss."
The effect was instantaneous. Some of the older senators stiffened. Others exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions flickering with recognition. The newer officials, those who had not fought in the human wars, seemed confused by the reaction.
The sovereign tilted his head. "The name means something to some of you."
Vyrek's mandibles clicked once before he answered.
"General Adrian Voss. The harbinger of sorrow."
The chamber dimmed as the central display flickered to life, pulling archived war footage from the Empire's vast historical records. A holographic projection materialized, grainy, distorted by time, but unmistakable. A human fleet, moving with impossible coordination.
An imperial stronghold, its defenses peeling away like fragile paper as precision strikes dismantled every strategic point.
And then, the final image: an imperial admiral, his exoskeletal plating shattered, kneeling before a human woman clad in battle-worn armor. She was not imposing in stature, yet there was something undeniably lethal about the way she held herself.
Her expression was unreadable. Unforgiving.
Then, with a single, silent command, she executed the admiral, and the feed cut to black.
The younger senators stared, uncomprehending.
The older ones remembered. "She was presumed dead after the fall of the Terran Republic," Vyrek said grimly.
"If she has returned, if she has been planning for this, then we are facing a war we are not prepared for." The sovereign did not react immediately. He considered. Processed.
Then, he turned to Zelvarn.
"Where is the prisoner now?" Zelvarn hesitated. "Etheron Prime."
The sovereign's gaze darkened.
The Senate chamber doors burst open before he could speak. A breathless communications officer stumbled inside, eyes wide with terror. "High Sovereign."
"The Etheron Prime command network has been breached." The room froze. Vyrek's voice was dangerously quiet.
"By what?"
The officer swallowed.
"A single transmission."
The chamber's central display flickered again, hijacked by an unauthorized source. The image that appeared was not that of a fleet, nor a battle map. It was her.
Adrian Voss.
She sat in the command chair of an unidentified warship, the faint glow of tactical displays reflecting against her cold blue eyes.
Her expression was unreadable. Her voice was razor-sharp, deliberate, and final. "You took my husband."
The room was silent, as if the entire Senate had forgotten how to breathe.
Adrian leaned forward slightly, her presence impossible to ignore. "Now, I take your empire." The transmission cut out.
For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Empire knew fear.
Panic spread through the Empire like a sickness.
Across the core worlds, the machinery of Imperial control lurched into overdrive, fleet mobilizations, planetary lockdowns, emergency declarations, each measure executed with the cold efficiency of a regime accustomed to crushing resistance before it could take root. But this was no ordinary rebellion. This was something else. Something worse. On Etheron Prime, the nerve center of Imperial governance, High Marshal Corvith stormed through the war room, his armored boots striking the marble floor like hammer blows. The chamber, a vast spire of steel and glass, overlooked the planet's sprawling skyline, a world built on the foundation of absolute order. Yet now, the foundation was cracking. Corvith turned his glare toward the holographic battle map dominating the room's center. The display pulsed with red warning symbols, each marking a fresh disaster. The Etheron Prime Command Network breached. Velis 4, a vital Imperial stronghold, silent. A classified supply depot in deep space, obliterated. He exhaled through gritted teeth. It was impossible. The enemy's movements were precise, unrelenting, deliberate. Not chaotic insurgency. Strategy. Who is leading them? Corvith demanded. Silence. No one spoke. Corvith turned, eyes narrowing at the officers stationed along the perimeter. Zelvarn stood among them, his reptilian features locked in a grim expression. He had warned them. They had not listened. "We don't have confirmation," an intelligence officer stammered. "But, the woman in the transmission. Adrian Voss." Corvith said the name like a curse. The officer paled but nodded. A cold dread settled in Corvith's gut. The last time Adrian Voss had waged war, she had reduced entire fleets to debris and silence. And now, she had returned. He turned to a subordinate. "Order an immediate security purge. Lock down all military networks. Cut off all non-essential transmissions." "Sir, that will cripple internal communications." "I don't care." Corvith's voice was steel. "Voss is inside our systems. We assume she can hear everything." Across the war room, a new alert flared to life. The officers stiffened. Etheron Prime's planetary defense grid compromised. Corvith's blood turned to ice. He slammed a fist onto the console. "How?" The answer came in a single, chilling transmission. A voice, smooth, calm, and undeniably human, slid through the encrypted Imperial frequencies. "You built your walls high." The war room fell silent. "But you forgot to watch the gates." Corvith's hand clenched into a fist. It was her. Before he could issue a response, the display flickered and the entire room shuddered. Not from a distant battle. Not from a system malfunction. From something inside the planet's defenses. The room's illumination dimmed. Emergency sirens wailed through the citadel. Officers scrambled to access their terminals, only to find unresponsive systems, corrupted data streams, and dead comm channels. One of them turned, face pale with terror. "Sir, our orbital weapons array just went offline." Corvith's breath came slow and controlled. "Get me a direct line to the Sovereign." The request was met with silence. The officer swallowed hard. "Sir, the Sovereign's palace is no longer responding." A single realization settled over the room like a death sentence. Adrian Voss had not just breached their systems. She had already infiltrated the planet. And by the time they understood how deep her attack went, it would be too late. The Empire fell in silence. Not the silence of peace, but the hollow stillness that follows destruction so complete there is nothing left to scream. The streets of Etheron Prime, once filled with the ceaseless march of Imperial legions, lay empty beneath the smoke-choked sky. Towers of black stone, symbols of power that had endured for centuries, burned from within, their foundations shattered by precise, unrelenting strikes. The city had not been conquered, it had been dismantled, piece by piece, system by system, until all that remained was a broken husk of what had once been the beating heart of galactic rule. In the grand hall of the Imperial Citadel, the Sovereign lay slumped against his ruined throne, his many-lidded eyes unfocused, his body twitching with the last remnants of failing nerve impulses. His blood, thick and iridescent, pooled beneath him, seeping into the cracks of the shattered floor. The throne room doors, once an impenetrable barrier of obsidian and reinforced alloy, had been blasted apart, their remains still smoldering. Adrian Voss stood at the threshold, stepping over the bodies of the last Imperial guards, their weapons still clutched in lifeless hands. She moved without hesitation, her armor darkened by battle, her expression unreadable. The war had ended the moment her fleet breached the surface, but there was still one final act to complete. At the center of the room, High Marshal Corvus knelt. His once pristine uniform was torn, his face marred by blood, his own and that of others. The defiance in his eyes had not yet died, but it was cracking, fraying at the edges beneath the weight of understanding. He had underestimated her, underestimated humanity, and now, as he looked up at the woman who had undone the Empire in a matter of hours, he knew there would be no negotiations. Adrian stopped before him. The silence between them was thick with the unspoken. "You knew," Corvus said finally, his voice hoarse. "You knew exactly where to strike. Exactly how to break us." Her gaze remained cold. "You broke yourselves. I only made sure the wound was fatal." Behind her, the remnants of her strike team secured the room, moving with precise efficiency. The Empire had fallen, but the galaxy still watched. Order had to be reshaped, and she had no intention of allowing chaos to take root in the vacuum left behind. Corvus exhaled, the last ember of defiance flickering within him. "So this is it, then? You take the throne?" Adrian's lips curved, not a smile, but something colder. "You mistake me for a ruler." Her weapon whispered as it left its holster. Corvus closed his eyes. The shot rang out once. The Empire was finished.